That might be a bad sign.
Already so. Had a slight bitterness to it.
Alright, we're live.
So we are live. Good morning. Today is Friday, April 19th. It's 8:40 a.m. This is the meeting of Senate Natural Resources and Energy. We're resuming our work on Bill S 289. Renewable Energy Standard Bill. And with that, we have a few guests today with us via Zoom. And in fact, our first guest of the day is via Zoom. Good morning, Ms. Smith.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and the committee.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I will need to screen share.
Oh. You'll have to wait a second. I didn't know I was taking my screen.
I'll begin by introducing myself. I'm Annette Smith, Executive Director of Vermonters for a Clean Environment. And I'm going to speak to you this morning about the land use aspects of the renewable energy standard.
You're all set.
Thank you.
Okay, got it.
One of the parts of the conversation that we've got a lot of technical conversation here and in the work group and less on the land use side of things. But thank you.
Yes, and so I was a member of the Department of Public Services Stakeholder Advisory Group, and it was very valuable to get an insight into what went into the model. So I'm going to take you through this briefly. The light green is the environmental health benefits, and these are the various scenarios that were modeled, and you'll see the different sizes. So upon inquiry, what we learned was that those are specific to the reduction in gallons of groundwater used at a fossil fuel plant. You'll also notice the greenhouse gas benefits. Those are what are considered societal benefits, of which about 4% would accrue to Vermont. And so when the cost and benefit scenarios was looked at for Vermont, the price suppression benefits about 4% of the regional benefits, and essentially no health benefits, or very, very little if you can find any green in there. So a couple of us, I think Billy Coster of ANR and I, provided information about the environmental costs we've seen to wetlands, streams, stormwater, all the sorts of things that you all have been talking about in the Act 250 bill about guiding development to where we want it and not putting it in places where we especially consider critical resources. And so we tried to provide, and I don't know what Billy Coster provided, but I heard that he did submit something. We tried to submit some information to inform the model, but that was not included. So the land use costs are not included in the model. This is in one of the appendices of the model, and this gives the various numbers. So under current business as usual, the number is 879 acres. Any of the scenarios, and Renewable Energy Vermont has come up with some numbers, they're very similar, about 2,300 acres. So we're looking at more than double the land use impacts for this renewable energy standard, while not having done anything to address the need to pay more attention to the location. I think, as you heard from Carrick Johnson yesterday, there is a real desire to build renewables in the right locations. Massachusetts did, this was done by Mass Audubon and Harvard Forest, a very extensive report, way longer than I'm going to go through with you. But to sum up what it said, it is basically provide incentives for where you want to build and disincentives for where you don't want to build. So right now, this renewable energy standard is open season for our fields, our forests, and our mountains, with absolutely no guidance in where to build these. So who's benefiting from this? So this is Shaftesbury Solar. This is every field, every tree that you see in this picture would be covered, about 85 acres of solar panels over about 102 or 104 limits of disturbance with a new substation. One thing that's interesting in this is that uh, some in the industry claim that Vermont isn't doing enough. And in terms of capacity of percent of peak load, Vermont has actually done more than any other state. And so if you want to look at regionally where it makes sense to build out more at this time, it's some of the other states, but Vermont is way ahead in terms of capacity. I just thought that was worth pointing out to you. This same company has submitted an advance notice for a project that would cover about 125 acres in Fairhaven, almost entirely on agricultural soils. And just 2 nights ago, their 50 megawatt project was announced, and it would cover agricultural lands. It's 300 acres, nearly 230 football fields. Now, who is this company? Oh, well, let's go a little further here. So this is the location of the Panton one. And if you look at Velco's optimized geographical distribution for Middlebury, it shows they have room for about 50 to 100 megawatts. So this area would actually get half of it used up with just that one project. GMP's distribution map, there has not been, as far as I know, any attention paid on the House side to the equitable build out of distributed renewable energy for the areas that don't have the capacity. And this is the area of the Panton project. It's in red. If you zoom in and look at the substations, you find that the substation capacity is actually a negative, something like 56%. And so the costs of building out all this distribution are not factored into the renewable energy standard. There was an amendment introduced in the House to require that any new generation is built only in the areas that can support it already. But that negates the whole benefits of renewable energy is to build close to load, minimize the transmission costs, which I think you heard from Carrick yesterday, are rising. And so we really need to take the time to figure out how to get the renewable energy built in the right place. So the company proposing these three projects is called Freeport Commodities. It's a commodities trading company out of Connecticut. And they've been under investigation by the FBI for the last few years. And in December, they were fined $98 million for their bribing of Brazilians over their state-controlled oil company. This was a very long and in-depth investigation. And I don't know about you, but if I'm a Vermonter, I'm going to look at this and say, oh, gee, yeah, I want this company as my neighbor. And I have a lot of confidence in what they're going to be doing in my community. So who else benefits from this? Okay, Sunny's Development, that's their contractor. They're from Pennsylvania, and they're likely to come in and with their own workforce. They might hire some local people. In Ludlow, NextEra has a 20 megawatt project. Their contractors were from Texas and Michigan. They also have standard offer contracts. They're one of the top two beneficiaries of the subsidies of the federal government. This is Florida Power and Light, and they will be ready to take advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act and come into Vermont more. Another one is Iberdrola, the other largest subsidy recipient in Vermont. They have the Deerfield Wind Project. So we are led to believe that in Vermont, this renewable energy standard will spur development of our local companies. But what happens after these projects are built? So Greenbacker, these are investment banks, Greenbacker Capital, they now own all these projects that were Novus and Green Maple and NextSun and Encore. And they also, they're not on the map, but they also are a company that Norwich Solar sells their projects to. So the the Vermont companies get the permits and sometimes build them, sometimes they sell them before they build them. But then almost all the solar projects in Vermont are sold to investment banks. That's who's poised to benefit from these projects. Standard Solar, this is the company out of Maryland that MHG is selling to. They have a lot more projects that they own now. They've been applying to the PUC for standard offer contract extensions because of supply chain issues, as is true with many of the solar project developers. And that's how I learned that MHG was selling their projects to Standard Solar. And they're standard offer contract projects, but there are also other types. Brookfield owns the Sheffield Wind project and some solar projects. And as I found, not all these companies' ownership is on the map. So when we look at land use for wind, which is again poised to take advantage of this, the red here is our highest priority forests. And the orange is proposed projects that haven't been built. The yellow backgrounds are the projects that have been built, with the exception of the ones up in the very northern part. They have all been in the highest priority habitat blocks. And there's a study out of Finland that shows that the impacts go out about 5 kilometers for wildlife. So this is a very serious issue for habitat connectivity and also for the same sorts of things that you have just been looking at in H687 to try and protect the habitat. This committee has heard for years about forest blocks and habitat connectivity. So right now we have two completely different land use regulatory systems, one of which is proposing a tier system and is intending to try and drive development to the right areas and protect the more important ecological areas. And then we have this other renewable energy standard, which occurred to me yesterday, also is a tier system, but a completely different set of language. And it is doing absolutely nothing to direct development to the right places. There's been discussion about 500 kilowatt projects, and David Blittersdorf has a piece in Vermont Digger today that he says he sent to your committee. So the group net metering that is proposed to be eliminated in this bill, this is what it looks like. This is an all-earth David Blittersdorf project. It is in Bristol, and it was put in 2014. And then it was sold to a company called Marina Energy. I went and looked back on Google Earth and found that this project started to fail about 4 years ago, and nobody's taking care of it. There is no decommissioning requirement. Group net metering, which some people call virtual net metering, is being abused by the developers who are finding distressed land or distressed landowners and putting where there's three-phase power and putting projects in and they get their CPGs without any customers. This is not community metering. I have been hearing since at least 2010 or 2011 in the State House pleas for community solar. And I remember being at a public hearing that Representative Tony Klein held, and somebody said, "Where is our model for community solar?" And that's what's in this bill that is proposed to be developed by the Department of Public Service. And that's the part of the bill that Vermonters for a Clean Environment really wants to see move forward. We do support eliminating these net metering projects that are just gaming the system. They're getting very high rates. They're getting the high net metering rates. And then they're selling the projects to these out-of-state developers or investment bankers. And whether or not Vermonters are getting the power, they are adding to the transmission costs. They are not being built next to load where it can be served. I don't want people to be misled by this, which came from the Energy Action Network's report. This is about labor. And I think, as I've just shown you, the money that is leaving the state, and of course, there's Green Mountain Power owned by Energear, and so all the money that the profits from that are going out of state. This slide is not about the companies that that are owning all of this electric generation. I want people to be really aware of that. So as I look at this legislation and speaking to the Natural Resources and Energy Committee, I ask you to please stop with this increase in the tier 2 component without also doing something to direct development to the right places. I'm a big supporter of renewable energy. I live off the solar and have for more than 30 years. I'm not placing any demands on the transmission system. If we want to build out community solar, which is what I hear about from every community, what's in this for us? Where are we going to get our power? Green Mountain Power is actually doing a good job of this with the microgrids that they're developing. But we need to change the focus away from the developer-driven chosen sites to the community sites. And so we also don't have a problem with the Global Foundries language that's in here. But otherwise, I question why this is happening now to encourage these out-of-state and global investment banks to monetize our lands and our landscape, and at a time when they are also getting tremendous tax breaks from the property taxes that they are charged. You know, the $1,200,000 500 kilowatt project is only paying $2,000 a year in property taxes. There is a cost to Vermonters in this cost shift to benefiting the investment banks at the expense of our landscape and the people who live here. And if this passes, I can promise you are going to see a backlash. Every community where these things hit, where I'm contacted, people say they don't want to talk about how to stop the project. They say, how could our state do this? What's going on here? So I share that with you because I hear that over and over. People are absolutely shocked that we don't have a policy that guides development to the right places. So thank you for taking the time to hear me.
Well, thanks very much for bringing the land use impact side into the conversation. Can you please also send, once we're done, your PowerPoint so we can put it on our website and get copies for people?
Yeah, it wasn't really a PowerPoint, but I'll put something together for you.
Okay, slideshow, whatever. Sorry. The other thing is you were talking about that study. Are you do you feel like, although we haven't yet sorted out the kind of guidance you would like to see built into the policy level on directing generation to appropriate sites, that the path forward includes study sufficient to address that, or that there's more you'd like to see?
Well, what I saw from that study, which is only available in that storyboard, it was very extensive, was that they actually looked at all available rooftops and parking lots, and they did that data gathering. And I think we need to do that. And that's, yes, I would like to see a study that actually shows what is available. I don't want it to come from the industry. I want it to come from, I mean, we have GIS programs that are really excellent now, but we need to, everybody's saying, why aren't we directing it to parking lots and rooftops and the built landscape first? Let's find out what our capacity is for that first, and then the grid capacity. My dream of renewable energy siting is the communities and the utilities work together to find the sites and then invite the developers in to bid on them and bid the cost down.
Thank you. It's, just historically for me, I always worry a little when we start to attach too much significance to who's doing and who's owning a project, unless we're making claims about the economics of the project, and like the Vermont jobs claim, that kind of thing, or the profits returning locally. But I do worry that it's probably there's probably commerce clause things, I also don't want us to be xenophobic. And I'm still sorting out, I'm glad that you're bringing this stuff up. I want us to be careful to plan on good policy programs, not get too caught up on who ends up owning things or proposing
So,
things.
but keep in mind that you are dealing with unregulated merchant developers as opposed to regulated utilities. And so former PUC Chair Roisman made a very shrewd comment in the one of the workshops on the net metering rule. And he said to them, this had to do with parking lots. Would you tell us what it costs to build a canopy on a parking lot? Because it seemed like the PUC was very interested in creating some incentives for that. And he said, we don't know what your costs are. We don't know what your profits are. We don't know what your salaries are. They know all of that for the regulated utilities. And so that's the difference here is that I mean, I would like to see some regulation of these merchant developers so that there is some basis for understanding the costs and the profits and the benefits. But right now we have an level playing field. Green Mountain Power, loves this bill because they get to put any development they do into rates. Green Mountain Power, and they're guaranteed a profit and a return on investment. And that does get evaluated by the PUC, but what goes into these merchant projects does not get evaluated. So I think that that's something that is it goes beyond what you're talking about, Senator Brave, the Commerce.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to be careful about how we, learn enough so that we'll understand the nuances of it. And which is tricky because the merchant class is way more nimble than the legislative class. Right. Thanks so much. And with that, we're gonna move on to Ms. Byer, hear about I think net metering as it relates to housing projects you work on. So if you could join us at the table.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I always get a little nervous when I have a screen share, but I'm gonna give it a try here. Success. Can I make it bigger? I can't.
The corner drag.
Well,
If you could have the green button.
I know, I can't get my,
Not to go there.
but, well, there we go. All right, let me go with this. Good morning, I'm Kathy Byer, Senior Vice President, Real Estate Development at Evernorth, and I want to start out by thanking you for the huge amount of work you've done this week and getting H 687 now in the committee. We've had quite a week, so thank you. So I want to briefly describe a real world example of group net metering for affordable multifamily housing. This is a very small slice of the group net metering that you've been talking about. And this is, I'm going to talk, won't take much time to give you an example about a project called Bay Ridge Apartments in Shelburne. It's 68 apartments that we're building with Champlain Housing Trust. So when we started working on this project, we made a commitment to not use fossil fuels to heat our building. So we are using cold climate heat pumps. And in doing so, we will reduce obviously our use of fossil fuels and reduce our carbon emissions by 189 tons per year. So we made a great decision for climate change reasons. But as has been noted, the choice to electrify our building increases the operating cost for Bay Ridge if we compared to if we stayed on natural gas. So we, of course, want to keep the rents affordable, so we have to find a way to mitigate that increase in operating costs, and the best course of action is solar. So, of course, we turned to our rooftop. It was interesting to hear Annette Smith talk about this. And indeed, we are going to cover our rooftop. We plan for a flat roof, first of all, and then we're going to cover it with as many solar panels as we can. But when you're in a multifamily building, that rooftop has a lot of competition. First of all, the compressors for the heat pumps are sitting on top of it, so we have less space. And there's just more people per square foot in a multifamily building, so your electric load per square foot is much higher than a single family home. So compared to a single family home where you can pretty easily cover the electric load of a single family home. In a multifamily building like this, we're only able to offset 15% of our electric load with the roof. Fortunately, we were able to look across the street at a parcel already owned by Champlain Housing Trust. And we have a CPG for 150 kilowatt PV system ground mount. But in the context of net metering, this is considered group net metering. And under, as my understanding is, H289 is now written, we would not be able to do this in the future. The reason it's important, here's where I think it's a great location, it's hidden behind an existing building. But you can see just by adding the offsite, we are able to offset 36% more of our electric load. So combining the rooftop with the offsite, we're getting to 51% of our building load.
So your total project is 384K.
The top, that's our projected kilowatt production this year from the two systems.
So is electricity, you're seeking across the street, you said?
That if you're not on site, it's considered off-site group net metering. So if we were able to locate the 150 kilowatt system on the same parcel where we're building our building, then
Or
we'd be
the parcel
okay.
next door?
We're across the street. It's
Yeah.
across Route 7, be fair, it's not just a street. But that is the way the net metering rules are written. And in this case, all of the solar credits are going to 68 apartments. So it's not somehow a state investor, it is the owner of the affordable housing who wants to direct more solar to our affordable apartments. And you know this, our lowest income Vermonters live in rental housing. Renters, and in particular, lower income renters have not had access to the benefits of solar power. And really what we are seeking is a, I know it's probably going to call it a carve out, but we are seeking to have the ability to net meter to our affordable rental housing. And really to address the past inequities about getting the benefit of solar to lower income Vermonters. I mean, and in some ways, and I didn't hear this talked about yesterday, H289 still preserves the ability for single family homeowners to essentially net meter. So you're kind of turning equity in its head by saying, well, it's okay for single family homeowners who have been receiving 98% of the benefit of solar compared to renters. So we're trying to preserve that during just a bridge. Until the time there's a successor program in place. And why that's important is, I believe on Monday, Vermont is going to hear an announcement about Solar for All, which is the money from the Inflation Reduction Act, which is going to further increase our ability to add solar to multifamily housing. But if we don't have this tool in hand right now, we will be back to, we will put solar on our rooftops. I will guarantee you, we will put solar on our rooftops and it'll cover about 15% of the building load, but we won't be able to do the offsite option. So we did have this discussion in the House, and 1 year was added to the general sunset provision. So there's language for affordable multifamily housing to have the sunset go to December of 2025. And section 8 of it requires this report that discusses this successor program or replacement program. And that report is due January 15th, 2025. So it's highly unlikely the replacement program will be in place before the sunset occurs. And my request and the request of my counterparts in the affordable housing community ask that we consider extending the sunset to December 31, 2027. Because we do believe that there is interest and support among PSD and utilities to get to this successor program. I think it's achievable, and we look forward to working on that. And the cost of doing so, I think will be minimal, especially in the light that the PUC is now considering their biennial review of the net metering rate. And my understanding is that PSD has now recommended another 2-cent reduction in the net metering rate. So it's not those high, we all can the legacy CPGs that have much higher net metering rates are a thing of the past, and the newer systems will have a lower rate.
The system that's in, would you, I do the math well on this, what's the rate that this project will receive?
So this is a 150 and it got its CPG this year, and I believe the rate is between 14 and 15 cents. Elizabeth, looking at Elizabeth, she'll indicate she pulled that one out of her hat. I found it.
Okay, great, anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Fire, for coming. I'm not sure we're going to be making any changes to the bill at this point. I don't know what the process will be moving forward, but I'm very supportive of your recommendation. And if we are able to make changes, this would probably be my #1 priority of changes. And I also want to thank you for, I'm not sure if you had Ms. Bridgewater reach out to us. I'm not sure if she reached out to Senator McCormick, but this is very relevant in our district, especially with some of the development for the Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust. And I would hate to see them not have access to those federal funds as they continue to develop in our downtowns. It feels like a real blending of the two. So I hate for us to not recognize this concern and lose out on opportunities.
Yeah.
Especially in our district.
Thanks so much. That intersection of what we do try to build in our downtowns, but there is no excess room. Solar panels on those locations, there's such tight sites, it's a hard enough time to fit the building on the parcel.
Not even on rooftops?
Well, we do on rooftops.
Okay.
Yeah.
And even so, it's not enough.
I mean, Central and Main and Windsor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
There's no excess land there. We'll put solar on the rooftops.
Super fun.
What's your sense of the timing here? We are sort of being pressured to get out of here in a few weeks. But you kind of said that there are things you can do meanwhile. Can this be pushed out?
Well, my hope is that we could push this sunset out a couple more years. Just so that, particularly with the solar for all money coming to Vermont, it's just like, the stars are aligned to add significant solar. At a time you're asking us to electrify our buildings, which is what we should be doing. So I talked to my peers outside of the state of Vermont and I told them, well, I'm not gonna have access to offsite net metering, and they look at me and they go, what? So it's really, it's so nobody could have planned this, but we have significant dollars coming to Vermont for
You
solar.
have to have that, legally, how do you have to?
The access to
You want the sunset pushed out.
December 31, 2027.
Yeah, now it's 2025, right?
Right.
And you feel that there's, and I think that's a reasonable thought, that there are projects in the works that take many years that they need access to this.
Any other great questions? So you're in the affordable housing business, obviously very sensitive to the population you're serving. Net metering does end up resulting in more expensive source of power. Utilities are obligated to buy it. Those does have there's a cross subsidy effect, and so it's a very genuine question. How do you sort of sort that out there? Because for those who are under economic strain, that will have the good fortune going into your projects, and I wish there were many more of them available. There'll be similar people who have similarly stressed family budgets who will come under a little more rate pressure by virtue of creating this income stream that better supports a worthy project. So I'm just wondering how you think about those two.
Yeah, that's a good question. I look around, and there are many programs like property taxes where we make adjustments based on income. And essentially this is what this is doing, is saying it only for net metered solar that is directly benefiting affordable multifamily housing that has requirements to keep the rents affordable. So it is, yes, there's a bit of a cost shift. I think it's a really small cost shift that we're talking about here. It's a very narrow universe. And I mean, there's cost shift associated with the single family homes that are having access to solar.
For sure, not disagreeing about that, I'm just, looking at the situation, and there's like, it's a balancing act, I was thinking about wanting to know how you think your way through it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've figured that for a while.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. There's that, and then. If we need to electrify our buildings, which we do. And we know that's gonna increase the operating cost of the nonprofit owners around the state. There is. The choice to electrify your buildings is a climate change choice, and to incentivize that. We need this access to solar.
Well, some of this reminds me of healthcare a little bit, like we haven't quite. We've chipping away on bits and pieces, a larger, more integrated program. Well, I think that's actually the point of the mind of the study, is that for years this discussion we're having right now, we've just had it 6 years ago. And every year since, and we haven't paused and set ourselves up to figure out that standard offer successor that ends up bringing more power on at a more affordable rate from the people. We've done this over here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would also say, to Ms. Byers' point earlier, is we've got a huge opportunity with federal funding. And individuals and businesses will in large part be able to take advantage of some of this. And I think it would be a real shame for whatever that cost is to not be given some benefit to the people who are most impacted, which is our low income Vermonters. It feels like we are almost, I think, I'm not exactly sure how you worded it, but the unfortunate serendipity of negatively affecting the one group that we've so consistently called out as being valuable in being a part of the transition, I think both financially, and then also psychologically, where you've been unable to participate in the transition to a clean environment through lack of financial resources to do so. So I think that I think it's a false premise to say that the use of group net metering for multi-family home access to renewable energy will raise ever so slightly the amount that everyone else will have to pay. So therefore, that's a negative. Like, I think that that's actually, I don't actually think that that's the right argument, because we're talking about federal funding that's going to have to go somewhere. Or will go somewhere, whether it's in our state or in other locations, or in not supporting low income families in our state already. So I actually think it's kind of a false narrative to pit those two things against each other.
Well, but that's 101% open to learning. You can work with someone who has that math, because it's a math problem.
Different problems.
Yeah.
We tend to do one math problem at a time and ignore the other 5.
And I also think to the point that I was trying to make earlier is it doesn't seem that we're going to be changing anything in this bill. So I'm only voicing my concerns.
Sure.
In some framing of it, and while I would really like to see this change, it seems like that's not a possibility. But I don't know, I'm not trying to like say something that isn't. I wanna be able to make sure that I can communicate.
I'm guessing that everyone at the table could say what, express what you're saying, so if there's a desire to address this issue. What I'm leading up to is, we're on a schedule that's gonna make that difficult. And by virtue of the fact of being that there's a sunset, there's even an entire legislative session open to us.
Yeah.
Then, if I'm back, I'm committed to working on this. It's taken. We're not getting everything done all at once. So, Senator McCormick and Senator McDonald, then we can go to Representative Sylvia.
I think I'm just rephrase what you just said, just make sure I got it right. Being on a schedule, facing a deadline is a bad reason to let an opportunity go by. But if we can push that deadline out, not the deadline of the bill, but the deadline to get this done, and push that out.
Well, I think to that point, right, so there's that bigger deadline, have a sunset that's far enough out that there's opportunity for action. The other thing is that, having looked at the number of requests to provide testimony and the fact that we came into this right on the heels of 687 spilling over a little bit. I'd like us to move the road to the beginning of next week.
Oh,
Give ourselves a little reading, taking some more time, have the weekend and Monday to gather some information. But stick with a Tuesday so that we're not quite so up against.
Well, then we have time for some language changes.
Well, so we also have other witnesses, so point noted, and. Senator McDonald, you have something?
I'm gonna frustrated. Listen. What we believe we know about electricity and for electrifying. And making decisions, yes, we don't follow what we know, the first year that we did standard offer, the first year. How did we decide where it went?
Well, if we, I know the answer, you know the answer, that's a rhetorical question, just tell us how it happened.
It was
all
by-
right?
It was by lottery.
Right, exactly.
We said, we're gonna let people, we're gonna pay them this amount of money to do. Renewable energy, solar, et cetera, it was by lottery. The next year we came back and. The decision was, in this committee was. To do it by lottery again. We learned something in the first year, that we were building stuff where you couldn't get it to market. You know, another rhetorical question would be, how did Rockefellers get rich? Most people say, well, they drilled for oil. Others, say, well, they got all these gas stations and sold oil to people with automobiles. No,
The railroad.
they controlled the transportation of the product, like Green Mountain Power does. And Vermont Electric Delco does. They controlled how it was shipped. Another question, what percentage of electricity's cost is devoting to moving electricity from here to there? Does anybody know that one?
yeah, what's the transmission cost? I think Velco actually did show us the
Does
slide.
anybody know what the number is?
We could pull it up from their slide.
40% of when you write your electric bill. 40% is to simply move it from here to there and back again. Or across the street. We don't address that. We're not addressing that. And the big argument this committee had in the second year, standard offer. Was to say, no more lottery, we said, no more lottery in the second year, we'll go to priority to where the capacity of the wires to make electricity already exists. My last statement. There was a suggestion is, what difference does it make who owns the electricity? And the answer is all the difference in the world. We build it, and maybe not the best places, and then when it's built, the people who have built it sell it. And they sell it to corporations who are gonna make money shipping it, and controlling it, and market it up. And we say it doesn't make any difference who owns it.
I don't know anyone in here who said it doesn't make a difference.
We were talking about who owns these things isn't the issue, we ought to be doing more of them. I mean, I think that was your, and that's a reasonable
I said,
place to start, but
okay, I don't wanna spend too much time rehashing.
too much time on what? Doing the same thing we've been doing and saying we can't change it because we've got a a bill before us that makes the same mistakes we've been making in the past?
I don't think I would characterize it that way. I said, I want to be careful about our conversation around making decisions based on ownership. I didn't,
Well,
I mean, it's like, it's worth knowing who owns and what the financial implications.
and what their
Ownership are.
interests are.
Okay. Agreeing on that one.
Right.
So
So,
if their interests are not in electrifying everything, but in shipping electricity as much as possible, because that's where their profits are, they're gonna relish the idea of having to ship stuff long distances. Because that's where their money is.
thank you. That figure, I'd like to learn more about that figure. 40% seems high, but I've never heard it before, so. But, Representative Seville will come back for a second time and
Which gotta find it.
he's been waiting for her.
We've been operating with that figure for 15, 20 years.
Maybe I've just forgotten.
Maybe it's less.
Good morning, Representative Sevilla.
They're great. And I'm hoping that you all can help me. There's a roll call. I'm not sure.
Oh,
We
you
won't know
know.
about that, but I just asked my committee system that notified you.
You know what?
We've done legislation.
Need to.
Well, no, that's. I may need to.
That's all another line for.
That's just a vote, not a roll call.
Oh,
So
if you want, you can.
I think we'll need to assemble ourselves for a while. I'll put a look at least 20 or 30 minutes. So for something like that might happen. Hopefully I'll be gone.
All right, so, the Senate roll calls, I've timed Secretary Bloomer, his record so far is 56 seconds.
Wow.
So, but the House, you have a little lead time, and then the second bite at the apple time. So please, let's jump right in on 289. Thanks so much for coming down again.
So Chair Sheldon, or Chair Sheldon, excuse me, Chair Bray, I am in the Senate. Would you let me know, do you want me to actually walk through the bill or have you had
I think-
do that?
We had to pause on our Ledge Council walkthrough. Council's coming back to finish that.
Great.
So if you could really just talk to us about the contours of the bill, like what came into the committee, how do you look at it, and how do you land where you landed in terms of like the overall design?
So, great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your work on this bill. I know we are all really pressed. So to start with, this bill comes as a result of work that we did last year in Act 33. So the House sent you all and you agreed to legislative working group on renewable energy standard reform. Chair Bray and Chair Sheldon co-chaired that work, and myself and
Senator Watson?
Senator Watson, were also on that committee, and that committee brought together stakeholders and constituents around the renewable energy issue. So both the utilities, the regulated utilities, the industry, environmentalists, and very, very specifically, a couple of other points. One was a facilitator. Because we know that there are many competing interests. I've heard you referencing that already today. And some inconsistencies, particularly in our utility size across the state. And in addition, very specifically, and this is something that was really important to me, we included in this that the Department of Public Service would be invited to attend and participate in those meetings. In fact, they did in 5 out of 8 of those meetings. We knew that they were conducting a public process during that time, talking with Vermonters about energy, and we were able to benefit from the results of the survey work that they did, and a number of the analyses that they did as we were deliberating. I think that Senator Bray, you'll recall that we were not quite finished, and Senator Watson, that we were not quite finished when our time ended. But the group of stakeholders was really engaged and working.
Our final meeting request to them was keep working and come back to that index report.
That's right, that's right. And as you all know, we do have very tiny municipal utilities. We have a single, we have a single customer utility with Global Boundaries, and we have a very large utility. And so crafting a renewable energy standard that addresses all of their needs, not crafting, but updating, because we have a renewable energy standard that has worked, as you all know, and it did many of you before me, has worked really well to help stabilize our rates in Vermont. And updating that, I think, was an important opportunity as we are seeking to electrify. And as we are seeing an influx of funding, and trying to build housing, trying to do a number of things, all at the same time, an opportunity for us to make sure that we had tailored the renewable energy standard to each utility. And that has been done in this, and I think it's quite remarkable. And it's been done in a way that I think manages costs, which is number one, not number one, but of the top three for our utilities who have to deal with the ratepayers. So moving through that, the stakeholder group came in to this session, working and came together around an agreement between utilities, environmental advocates, and renewable energy industry, which takes into account the Department of Public Services work, which the members participated in. This bill respects the priorities that Vermonters identify in the department's work: affordability, reliability, and reducing carbon emissions. And it does this by tailoring the energy standard to each utility. It increases resilience by increasing distributed renewable generation. It specifically provides for new offsets for old net metering renewables, except for GMP, which is especially beneficial to our most rural utilities as they work to harden the grid. And that is a real priority for me, in particular, thinking about coming from rural Vermont, thinking about our two co-ops, which are very rural and very rich. This also keeps existing renewable energy generation definitions in place and requires that new load growth be met with new renewables and storage, which is important as we're seeking to increase electrification. This does eliminate offsite group net metering. And it requires the Department of Public Service, the utilities, and the affordable housing community to report back on how to ensure a replacement renewable energy program for affordable housers. This elimination was a key factor in being able to achieve agreement. And we were not able to take into account all of the cost pressures, but this was one, and it was important. It also includes reporting language on meeting the goals of the RES that was requested by the Department of Public Service. And I think those are the broad contours. How else would you like me to elaborate?
Right, I go to questions now. Thanks for the offer. Anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all your hard work on this bill. I know it took your committee a substantial amount of time to kind of digest, understand, and then come out with something that everyone felt reasonably in agreement on. And I wanted to ask, I think I have two questions. One, just to preempt it, I want to ask about the fiscal note in that process, if you could speak to it, but because it's there seems like there were a lot of different ways that was interpreted, and I kind of want to understand how you landed on it and what happened in the money committees. But my first question is, with the group debt metering conversation, did you discuss having the group debt metering ending happen only for a certain size of project? Did you consider was there any conversation of making it if you were, let's say, a 15 kW or smaller system, like maybe a traditional house? and your group net metering on that small scale, allowing for that to exist. But dealing with maybe the cost pressures that do happen with very large group net metered systems where there's only one or two off takers. Did you discuss kind of any of that dynamic?
We did not discuss the size for our group net metering. And we know that virtual group net metering, particularly with development projects, it ends up being part of the financial stack. Is necessary in order to make a project pencil out. And so while we want to make sure, and that's why we included a study, that renewable energy is accessible to our affordable home communities. There, we believe, are going to be less expensive ways than net metering to ensure. And so we feel really good about the study group that is in here, asking them to come back.
Okay, thank you. And then with the fiscal note, so
Yes,
so you had a first fiscal note, and it was a very large amount of money. And then you had a second fiscal note, which was a smaller amount of money, and was there a third fiscal note? Or
yes, there was, and so. Thinking about how the project came in,
yeah,
so we had the department coming in with their own proposals, so both proposals are based and consider the values that Vermonters put forward, which we expect. The department, the administration came forward with its own proposal, and the stakeholder group, through their efforts to come to consensus, came forward with another, which the House supported. The first fiscal analysis that came out was the department's analyzing their own process. And that process, it's really important to know that the department put forward a proposal that did not tailor the renewable energy standard to each utility.
oh, okay. What's that?
And that's right, and also testified that doing so was complicated, and I agree, it is more complicated than applying, but I would say that it's better to do that, and we can do hard things, and so, there you go. We can, that is one of the first challenges that we had with the fiscal note.
Okay,
And so the first note, I believe, relied on the department had their own fiscal analysis that went with them, economic analysis that went with their work, as the working group had their facilitator and also JFO. So the first fiscal note relied on the analysis that was economic analysis that was done from the department, as I said. So that was not right,
Yeah.
because we had worked through with each of these utilities. So I think the reason for multiple was just trying to get to the detail, to the fine detail. And I think it's actually an extraordinary fiscal note that we
Yeah.
printed on, it's got an extensive amount of information.
and I do appreciate, Miss Manchester was clearly watching yesterday and immediately sent out an email with the correct one, but they spent some time at the end on why were they updated, like, they do note that in the fiscal note, but I just wanted to understand if there was it a request, like it was just kind of a request by the committee, and do you feel like this accurately reflects now kind of what the fiscal impacts would be?
I definitely do, and what the administration had been saying, and we still hear some of this, is $1 billion.
Yes.
As I said, the House and the stakeholders really shared the values that were developed, and put forward as the department's surveying of Vermonters in their work around affordability and reliability. So $1 billion cost is actually not going to be awesome. That is over 10 years. But it's 150 to 450.
Yeah,
Is, we believe, much more accurate. So that again is over 10 years, and I would just remind this committee, who I probably don't need to remind, that the efficiency charge every year is about $15. About 15 years.
And the 50, 50. I think that's really pointing out our electrical energy efficiency.
Just for scale.
It is currently running at about 50 million a year, so if you push that over 10 years, same period, you'd be 500 million. So to put that billion into scale,
And the 150 million that just may be.
right? And just so for people who are trying to follow, because we reference more than one fiscal note, so the fiscal note we have on our website is for the as passed bill, and it's dated March 25th, 2024. So we have that, we have that version, the most current version up. And there's a chart in there that talks about if the cost is 150 million or if the cost is 450, so people can see how it scales out, and it runs from 2025 all the way to 2035. Thank you for not every bill comes through with a mature fiscal note, so thanks for like keeping that cooking so that we're getting
What does it tell us?
what does it tell us?
Yes,
Uh,
what's the significance of the $50 million energy efficiency charge?
So. I provided that number for scale, Senator. So what the fiscal note tells us is that the potential cost over 10 years is 150 million to 450 million. And I provided the 50 million a year for the efficiency charge as a scale. So over 10 years, that would be $500,000. So people can understand what we're talking about. And Senator Bray has helpfully pointed out that you can also see here through the work of JFO, what the likely cost on rates is of the 150 to 450 million.
Compared to what?
So it's not.
doing nothing.
Well, rates are going up if we do nothing, because there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done because the climate is changing on our grid. So, and Velco has provided a lot of detail on that.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
being rhetorical questions. The reason we have gone from the highest electric rates in New England 20 years ago to the lowest is because of the energy efficiency charge
Yes.
in large part.
And the
The
rest.
single most significant reason we've gone from the highest to the lowest. So is the energy efficiency charge an expense or is it a cost reduction?
So it's
Or you could come up with your own answer.
I guess I'm not going to talk about that, and
Well, you just started talking about.
Senator, I have.
We engaged in that conversation, but
I
we don't
only
follow it
provided
to the end of it.
Yeah.
The conclusions it's not on you, it's on us.
I'm just providing that number so that there's some scale, because when we talk about billion and 500 million, sometimes it's hard for the public that watches these hearings to really understand how that will affect them. And so that's the only reason that I brought that in, and I apologize for doing so.
Okay, because the number you brought in was responsible for the rates being now in large part, but it's most significant part, the lowest in New England.
Yes,
And there are some people that attack the energy efficiency charge because they in their industry believe that they personally would benefit even by getting rid of it, even though the rest of the population would suffer the consequences of getting rid of it.
and Senator, I know you were here, a number of you maybe were here with when the renewable energy standard was put in place, and I would say that that is also a large part of why Vermont's rates are the lowest in New England, and also why they are amongst the most stable, because our utilities enter into long-term power purchasing agreements, because they're aware of our regulatory framework. We've got a stable regulatory framework with PUC and the department, and so that has allowed our utilities to be well-balanced. And I think this bill, this update is one of the best ways that we could modernize it by tailoring it to each utility. And doing so in agreement with industry and the environmental community. I mean, it feels like a big investment.
So I don't know if you heard Karen Johnson's testimony yesterday, because you gotta go in and out,
And I do apologize.
or you may have brought in things since we made in that house, but, it was interesting to hear how much is going on in the industry around us, sort of, invisibly for the most part. And how, 89 to 89 looks, sets us up to be in a better place to work with and evolving industry around. In my opinion. Yeah, so before we snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory, I would say, the energy efficiency charge, the first 20 years cost us $789 million. We invested that money and the net savings are 2.8 billion. So roughly 4 to 1 on savings for that sort of forced investment, I guess we could call it. And, getting interested.
I like to think of that as affordability doesn't just happen. You've got to really get in there and figure out how to keep things stable under these cycles.
So thanks so much for staying with us. I feel like the light is not blinking anymore, so maybe you're fine, that's not a roll call. Even we've been doing a little agenda adjustment on the fly. I'd like to take our, take a break right now and resume at 10 o'clock. And I'll connect with people who are on the agenda and just make